Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pearl Jam podcast, album of record. And you only get so many episodes with a brand new Pearl Jam record. And we have a brand new Pearl Jam record. By the time you're hearing this, you're probably listening to a legal copy. Congratulations. Um, Joining me, as always, is Andrew. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that Andrew's got kind of a personal essay or review that he's going to go with, and I'm just going to let him rock and roll first. Then we're going to have some discussion. So, Andrew, how's it going?
Going pretty good. I'm a little disappointed, and for any YouTube watchers might notice I'm in a different location. And of course, I forgot to bring my normal podcasting camera and mic. So we're doing it old school with the MacBook video and the AirPods, but we'll get through. But it's a shame I had to resort to this for the what's probably my favorite episode we're going to do so far, but that's life. So, but yeah, I figured I would just start. I kind of wanted to just, rather than like go through a bunch of, minor points and then go with an overarching takeaway at the end. I kind of actually wanted to start big picture first and just jump right to the chase and tell everybody right up the front how I feel about this album. And I can say this with, no equivocation, no hyperbole, no qualifying. This is a great Pearl Jam album. When we found out that Pearl Jam was working with Andrew Watt on this album, I think, there were a couple different ways this could go. And Andrew Watt didn't do the Rick Rubin thing. Rick Rubin is notorious for getting bands to sound like versions of their old selves, whether it be something like Metallica's Death Magnetic, he was trying to get them back to being that thrash garage band again. That's not what this album is. I think some people were confused a little bit by that, by some of the comments, when we heard Mike McCready say, this is the hardest we've rocked in a while. And Ed saying, this is our best work. And I think people hear that and took that to mean, this is a quote return to form. That's not what this album is. Instead, what Andrew Watt did is he reminded Pearl Jam that, quite frankly, they're a great band and that they should trust their instincts, work faster, more viscerally. And in the end, what Watt really did was he sparked Pearl Jam's creativity. And I don't think that this is me putting myself in the story as though I was there to know that. We've heard lots of interviews with the band members on this so far, and they've all talked about this, the way that Andrew Watt got them to get back to the feeling of just creating together in a room. This wasn't a bunch of people working on material that might as well be a solo album. Every guy having their own songs that then they bring in and the band all works on it. And so, what we really got, I would say, is not a band trying to bank on nostalgia. It's not a return to their roots album. This isn't a sounds like 90s Pearl Jam album. But what it is a new Pearl Jam album that sounds like innovation and a progression. It sounds like Pearl Jam while not sounding like any other Pearl Jam record. And I think that's really the major accomplishment of what this album is. For Pearl Jam, the angst of youth is gone. The band are now elder statesmen. There are not many rock bands left who have been around longer than Pearl Jam have. They can be confident in their craft. They can craft beautiful songs. They can build songs that just, start as one thing and turn into something completely different by the end. They don't have to feign anger and resentment anymore. They can focus instead on loss. They can focus on mortality and the passing of time. I mean, these are still serious issues that affect everybody. They don't have to act like they're still 20-year-olds screaming at the world. And, they can really, they can be confident and comfortable in making great rock songs that kind of pull elements from other genres. And that even includes pop. There are lots of elements of pop music even in some of these songs. And that's why, to me, this album is the spiritual successor to Yield. It may not be fair to binaural, but this album feels like what could have come after Yield. It doesn't sound like Yield, but it sounds like the band who made Yield making another complete album. From start to finish, this is Pearl Jam at their best. There's going to be tracks that some people like more than others, of course. It's always that way. There'll some tracks some people won't like at all, but none of these are bad songs. And we've gone through recent Pearl Jam albums where we know there are bad songs on there. If there's anything I will sort of equivocate on and offer a qualifying generalization, it's that this album is so much better than we had any right to expect or even want. This doesn't feel like the hand wringing and eye squinting we've done on past Pearl Jam albums to find the things we love. You know, whether it be taking a song like Sirens and being like, man, like this is the Pearl Jam we love. Is the rest of the album going to sound like this? Or a song like Quick Escape and being like, man, I didn't know Pearl Jam still had this in them. We don't have to do that with this album. We can take this on the surface for what it is, and I think that it's an album that is a vital, relevant, important Pearl Jam album. They can and will play all of these songs live. Some of these are going to become new staples of their live show. And when we think of peak Pearl Jam, I don't think we can stop at Yield anymore. And maybe some people will say they stop at binaural, but I'm going to use Yield here. This album belongs in that pantheon. It may not be better than any of the first 5 albums, but I personally would have a hard time picking anything else for number 6 for my personal favorite Pearl Jam album. And I never thought it would be possible to feel this way again. At 44 years old, I feel like I just fell in love with Pearl Jam again. I talk about this album like a giddy teenager. Craig and I have been just texting each other messages nonstop for the last couple of days. I mean, literally, I tried to find something earlier today that we had talked about, and I had to just scroll endlessly through messages to find it. I have not felt this way about new Pearl Jam music in so long, and it's hard to talk about that without talking about the emotions that carries with it. I've cried to these songs. It's a little bit embarrassing to talk about again as a 44-year-old man, but you know, these songs make me feel real things. You know, I've pumped my fists in enthusiasm. I've sat back in contemplation and reflection. I'm listening to a new Pearl Jam album right now in the same way I listened to new Pearl Jam albums in the 90s. So I just think that this album cements Pearl Jam's place as an unquestionable all-time great band. It cements their place in my heart and my soul as my favorite band of all time. You know, this is a band that's already done so much for me in my life. And now they've given me one more gift when I sort of least expected it. And what more can I ever ask of this band other than, hey, let's do another, right? So that's my overarching soapbox that I'm going to come from for the rest of this discussion. So I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way so we know exactly where I stand on this album. I love this album.
So here's my number one question. I mean, that was great. I appreciate it. I agree with most of it. We're going to talk about a lot of these things, but here, at the end of it all, my question is Andrew Watt a Smashing Pumpkins fan? Because I need
Wow, you cut me off. Yeah, okay, I got you.
I need him to get in a room with Billy Corgan and
Yes.
James Iha and Jimmy Chamberlain and maybe even Darcy. I don't know, maybe. and give me another Pumpkins record the way he just gave us another Pearl Jam record. Now I'm going to go for a couple minutes.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
So I wrote up my thoughts. I couldn't wait. I normally these days I've been waiting for the podcast, but I couldn't wait. I listened to the album at least a dozen times, and it led me to want to write about it. This record has, I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't surpass anything. It doesn't replace anything. It doesn't harken back to 10. It doesn't beat 10. But it is powerful and awesome and all those superlatives because we love 10, because we loved Verses and Vitalogy and all those records and all those moments and all those live experiences. Though that causes us as listeners to give the band our ear, to give them our equity as fans, and open ourselves up to that. If this record came out by a non Pearl Jam and it was their first record ever, you and I would probably pass this thing over as just another record. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. But because this band has already done what they've done, that it is what it is. And so I think the context is important, and I think the fact that we grade this band on a curve is important, because that's what fans do. That's what fans do with bands that have put as much classic material on tape as Pearl Jam has put on tape. And that's not apologizing for it. That doesn't deprecate it. That doesn't make it in any way worse. It just goes to explain where we're coming from. I don't think you and I think that this is going to revolutionize radio and bring people back to alternative radio, or even create a whole horde of brand new Pearl Jam fans. I really don't think so. I think it could bring a lot of old Pearl Jam fans back to the table. And you know what? A lot of old Pearl Jam fans are still going to be grumpy about it because it sounds shiny, it sounds compressed, it sounds modern. And I don't want to get too far into each individual song, but it does. It sounds compressed and modern, and that's going to bug some people. It's going to bug some people that they're going to play a few of these songs instead of a few songs from Versus and the live shows, and that's okay. That's okay. But in the end, I'm with you, man. This album is more than what we were owed as fans. It's more than we ever could have expected as fans from a band of their age in 2024. And I just feel really lucky to have it. That doesn't mean every song is perfect, and we're going to talk about it. There's some like misses or kind of head scratchers going on here. And so with that, let's get into it. Like, should we just go from 1 to 11? Start at the top.
Sure, we can do that.
All right. So go ahead.
Can I talk real? Can we talk before we go song by song? Can we actually talk about the compression thing a little bit, just real quick, because it's going to apply to all the songs. I think first of all, I think it's really hard for us to actually judge what these songs all really sound like, because so far we've pretty much only heard a compressed version, right? Like, MP3s are by nature compressed. We have not heard the lossless versions other than at the theater event where it was, analog.
But even that one was streamed, so I'm not sure. That one was streamed.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. So the theaters streamed it, yeah.
But I believe we've heard enough at this point to know just kind of the production level and value. But no, you're right. We haven't heard the actual lossless versions.
The compression comes in the form of this idea. I listened to an interview Ed gave with somebody from K-Rock, and he talked about how when you listen to this, whatever you're listening to is the loudest part. Like if you're listening for the bass, that's the loudest part. If you're listening for Mike's guitar, that's the loudest part. And that's where some people will complain about that aspect, because that means that things are not positionally in front or behind things, that it tends to be a little bit more flattened. But I'll tell you, like, I don't know if it was just, some of it's the Dolby Atmos mix that I listened to, but even listening to the lossy version that we have with headphones, like I still hear a crispness in the various instrumentation that wasn't present in some of the past mixes. Like the way they've mixed some of their albums in the past, a lot of Mike and Stone's parts were really mushy in the middle. And you can distinctly hear those guitar parts very cleanly.
Well, that's something that Stone said specifically about the mix and working with Andrew Watt, was that he has a way of pulling out different sounds and really mixing and mastering in such a way that everybody feels like they get a little bit of love. Where a
Hmm.
lot of times a record, I won't say records and not Pearl Jam records in specific, but records in general end up sounding a little bit monotonous or monotone in their production value because they pick a lane and they stick in that lane so that another band that we love like Cloud Nothings, it feels like entire records are in the same lane, and the amount of detail that would pick out a rhythm guitar in this section and a lead guitar in this section and the bass in this section and then the drums in this section, that is another level. And this record feels like, when Stone said that, I was like, oh yeah, I am hearing that. When I heard that in an interview and I went back and listened, I was like, he's right. At different sections, I can almost like on a stage with a spotlight, from an audio standpoint, you can feel or hear where the spotlight is.
Yeah, no, that's very true. So, and the reason I wanted to just kind of address that is because I think, like, for some people, it's always going to just be a sin for a rock album to sound good. Like people, and it's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong
Real
with it. It's
records
an
were recorded
aesthetic.
in a garage with two mics.
Yeah, yeah, that's an aesthetic choice in that, a lot of people want a grittier sound, but like,
And I
I
love a
would
lot of
just,
records like that. I do.
I do too, but like, I would say again, though, if you go back and if you listen to Verses, like, Versus is a pretty clean sounding album. Like it really is. Like, and I just think that this album again achieves the sound that fits this band where they're at today. Again, they weren't trying to sound like 1994 Pearl Jam. They were trying to sound like the best they can sound in 2024, and from that standpoint, I think they succeeded, and I just wanted to defend the production of this a little bit because it's something you're going to hear a lot of, and I think a lot of it is because Andrew Watt has that reputation, so people come into it listening for it, and so when they hear it, there's a little bit of confirmation bias. Like, yep, see, it's Andrew Watt doing Andrew Watt things again. But I would argue that he was very fair to the band in the way that he put this sound together, and that everybody is represented in the way they should be represented on this album.
Well, and you don't. First of all, I agree with you. You don't have to defend it to me, as you know. However, as Pearl Jam fans, we kind of need to eat our own too. I mean, we've seen a lot of bad takes. Kind of the kind of people who are not going to be satisfied unless they can pretend that they did 10 over again, or if this was Versus Part Two.
Yeah,
Wherever you stopped loving Pearl Jam, that's the record you want them to make again. Um, there's some people who will absolutely put this one above No Code because they didn't like that level of departure. And so that's the situation that we're dealing with as Pearl Jam fans. And those people exist in the audience that we share the audience space with them. So,
for
um,
sure. Yeah. I just think, yeah, all those things have a time
and
and
yes, I
place.
called them bad takes. I did. I'm gatekeeping. I'm gatekeeping.
So be it. So be it. So yeah. So we can go through this track by track. I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way. Um, and yeah, we can start with Scared of Fear. Um, you want to go first?
No, you go first.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to talk about that intro. I'm such a sucker for interludes, and Pearl Jam has not done a ton of them, but I have loved almost every little weird interlude they've done, whether it be, you know, the outro to Inside Job on Avocado, whether it be Master Slave leading into Once, or coming again after release. Like they have these great ambient sounds that they put together, and I was stoked that they started this album off with that again. Then it kicks into Scared of Fear, and like I would say that this is a pure Stone Gossard riff. This is probably the most Stone Gossard song on the album. Um, but it starts off with like this like very traditional classic rock sort of riff. And I wasn't quite sure when this song started. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But then as soon as it went into that chorus, first of all, I love Ed's vocal melody in that chorus. I absolutely love it. But the thing that I love is, and this is what Stone Gossard does. If you listen to the chorus, the guitar part he's doing, I don't know what chord it is, but he starts off on the one, and it goes up, goes up, goes up, and then back to the one. Now, almost anybody else would go the second time, you're going to go right back up that same progression. But instead, when he returns to the one, he instead goes down and goes lower on those next four, and then back to the one again. And that's Stone Gossard. That's vintage Pearl Jam, because the rest of the song is doing the same thing that they did on the first run through. It's just Stone throwing a little wrench in this to give it a little bit of tension, and then, a little bit of anxiety almost, and an edge to it. And so as soon as I heard that in the theater, I was like, oh my gosh, like this, we're in for something. Like they were on it. Like they have not wrote, I shouldn't say they, but Stone has not really written this way in quite a while. On Gigaton, the only song he was like the lead writer on was Buckle Up, which is this nice little acoustic number, but it wasn't a traditional Stone Gossard song.
Well, and now we're going to jump out of the tracks again, because we've been reading interviews and listening to interviews, and we know things. And so what I've been picking up from hearing from all the band members is, number one, this is the most that they've written together in maybe 20 years. That's first of all. Second of all, when Ed convinced them to work with Andrew Watt, he said, "Hey, you're going to come to his studio. Just leave your instruments. Let's lean on his giant, cache of instruments that he's got in the studio." And so, part of the gimmick of getting in the studio was I think probably making them uncomfortable, and taking away some of the security blankets and some of the things that they'd come to rely on. Um, Again, I lean on myself, my own history as a musician, not because I'm comparing myself to Pearl Jam. However, the idea of creating independently and then bringing it back when you feel like it's good enough is a very different experience than like cutting your arm open and doing it live in front of people, including all the mess ups, all the screw ups, and all and being judged in the moment when you make a choice and it doesn't work. Everybody likes to talk about when you make a choice in a jam and it works, and everybody's like, yes, I love it. But holy cow, when you make a choice and it doesn't work and you're just exposed, you're exposed as a drummer or a guitar player. And we're talking about some of the greatest musicians in the world who allowed themselves to be exposed, not only to their core bandmates, but Andrew Watt. And I think that is something that they hadn't, it sounds like, based on their answers to the interviews. I'm trying not to project too much. It sounds like that's something that they hadn't done very much.
No, yeah, I think you're spot on. Like we're hearing the band all say the same thing. So I don't think that this is them projecting either. I think that's a true sense of what they did. And I think you're probably right that, like, when suddenly, Mike doesn't have his same strat he's been playing for every Pearl Jam album. What is that, a 58 strat, I think? He suddenly doesn't have that. He's playing Andrew Watt's guitars. He's going to, first of all, rather than falling back to just what he's been doing with that guitar, he's falling back on his natural instincts that allowed him to become the lead guitarist that he is in the first place. And I think that's very true of Stone as well. I think it just, Stone coming in, I don't know that maybe Stone didn't even necessarily want it to be that he had moved away from that, because I watched that video interview he did, and he's downright giddy about the way he was allowed. He said he felt heard by Andrew Watt in a way he hasn't been felt heard by a Pearl Jam producer in a long time. That Andrew Watt allowed him to do the things that where sort of his instincts wanted him to go. So that's a big deal, and I think that shines through in this song, and I think that's why it's such a powerful and effective opener for this album.
Yeah, it's a good opener. It's a solid opening album song from Pearl Jam. I'm not sure that this is one of the ones that's going to break into the all-time catalog. I think it'll sound great on this tour. I would guess that they're going to play it on this tour. Who knows? There's
I
better.
think if
There's
I
better to
actually think
come.
if I actually think if there was if they like bands still did late night shows, which I think maybe some still do, but like I mean, I don't know the last time Pearl Jam has done a late night show, but I think this is a song they would absolutely play on Saturday Night Live if they were on it. So I'm a lot higher on this song I think than you are probably.
I think it's a great song. I just when I say that, I'm thinking about how it would be. I'm kind of projecting how I think it will be received by the wider audience, even more
I
so
got
than
you.
just my own personal
Yeah,
opinion.
but
Which
I
brings
think it
us
would have a
to
good energy as a
yeah,
live song. Yeah.
which brings us to one that you and I think we agree on all the major points. I just happen to not like React Respond as much as you do.
Hmm.
Let me lead with the criticisms.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
so and this is something I forgot to say when it was my turn to talk about the record as a whole. Right, wrong, indifferent, fair or unfair. For me, Pearl Jam will always be a vocalist band. It will always be Eddie Vedder and then whatever else is happening. And I know everything else is important to make Eddie Vedder the best that he can be, but for me, it's the vocals first, and then everything else is second. Um, so React Respond is maybe my least favorite vocal, although it's also some of the most impressive. The one note he hits is like one of the most impressive moments on
Hmm.
the record, but he
Yeah.
kind of leans into this. I don't like the chorus. I think it's a very punk level chorus. I think this song, even though the instrumentation sounds nothing like the 1980s, I think stylistically it's like somewhere between Devo and late stage The Who. And it just ding 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 ding. It sounds like I think I joked with you that there should be a montage with Yahoo Serious dancing while the
Hmm.
song is playing. If only there were synths in it. And but I like the song better than that. I'm kind of making fun of it just for fun, but I know you like the song a lot better than I do.
Yeah, because for me, it just immediately reminded me of Queens of the Stone Age. So that was immediately as I was sitting in the theater at the first playthrough. As soon as this song played, I'm like, "Oh my God, this is what the people say!" Like off the last Queens of the Stone Age
But I like
record.
when Queens does it. I just don't want Pearl
Yeah,
Jam to do it.
because again, that's kind of Queen's bit. Like and like I said to you, like Queens commit to the bit too when they get to the chorus. Like they're all in on that aesthetic. Whereas this chorus goes obviously a much different direction, and the song in general goes in a much different direction. But if you listen to the opening riffs of people and from Queens and then React Respond, you'll hear how much they sound very, very similar. To me, it's got like that. So it has that like weirdness to it that I like, and then it goes into the sort of the punk chorus, and we've talked about this before. Punk's a lot more in my wheelhouse than your wheelhouse, so I think it kind of makes sense that I like it. I mentioned to you that Ed's vocals. He's doing uh, the Sex Pistols trick, where when you're leading people into this vocal melody that they expect, but then you don't quite hit that note. You're just slightly off that note, and then in that it creates like this weird tension because everybody knows what that vocal melody is that they're doing. Like Titus Andronicus is another one. Patrick Stickles is notorious for it. He does it all the time where what the vocal melody is that he's singing, but he's not actually singing that vocal melody. He's missing those notes. And that's kind of what happens in this chorus as well. So, but I like that tension, and I think you tend not to like it, that kind of tension as much.
Well, and on Discord, I sent you the clip. It was 9 seconds of exactly what I didn't like.
Yeah.
Should we
Yeah.
risk the YouTube algorithm and play the 9 seconds so that people can hear what
Go
I'm
for
talking
it.
about?
Go for it.
What's the worst that can happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
react, respond.
Yeah.
And I like when
His
Eddie sings. I like when he's melodic. And I've always felt like when they did heavy songs, a lot of heavy songs, or when they did a lot of punk songs, that they were doing an impression of their favorite punk bands or whatever else. But I never felt like it was a legitimate lane for Pearl Jam.
Yeah. No, that's true. Pearl Jam is not a punk band. They definitely wear that influence on their sleeves, but they're definitely not that. The when he does that react, it sort of reminds me a little bit of Forgetting Sarah Marshall, like it's sort of the the vampire rock
The
opera
Count, yeah.
thing. But that's also, again, that's the vibe though that I get from people from Queens as well. They're kind of going in that same vibe. So it is what
But
it is.
but once again, I don't hate the song. I think it's a good song,
Yeah.
even though it's not for me. Um,
Yeah.
which gets us to the one that, I mean, if there was any justice in the world, we'd save this one for last. But Wreckage, which they
Yeah.
surprisingly released as a single the day, well, yesterday, so 2 days before the record was
Yeah.
released. And
Yeah.
that song, it gets compared to Tom Petty, it gets compared to this, it gets compared to that, but it is one of the best Pearl Jam songs they've ever written. It's certainly maybe the best Pearl Jam song they've written in the last 20 years. Um, of all the best Pearl Jam songs you can name since No Code, and maybe even since Yield, it's the best one.
When we talk about songs that are just so at their core, like Pearl Jam, that they're in that identity, you're like talking about a song like Alive, Corduroy, those type of songs that are quintessentially Pearl Jam. Like, I feel like this is going to become that for this stage of Pearl Jam. They took everything they're capable of doing now that allows them to still be Pearl Jam, but sound confident in what they're doing. There's just a confidence to add these degree of harmonies to this song when that's not a thing they've done in the past in this kind of manner. These
And
just
does it
soaring
rip off the Heartbreakers
harmonies.
a little bit? Yeah,
Yeah, but I
absolutely.
think that's the point. That's the point. And I so and at the at theater event on Tuesday, the first time they played it through, it was just in the dark. There was nothing on the screen. It was in a modern theater with a nice, comfy recliner. So I was just reclined back, kind of had my eyes closed, listening as we went. And
High on
when this,
shrooms, right? You took shrooms?
no,
No?
not so much,
I'm
but
joking, everybody. I'm
yeah,
joking.
but I as when this song started, I immediately was like, "Whoa, what is this?" And then when they got to that middle breakdown and Ed's just doing the combing through the wreckage part, and just when some of those harmonies hit, I mean, I literally caught myself tearing up. Like, I felt the way I felt when I heard "Given to Fly" for the first time. I vividly remember the first time hearing "Given to Fly." I don't know if I've told the story on here before, and I won't tell the whole story now, but I was driving in my car and I had to pull my car over because I was just like, holy cow, the band I love is back. And that's the feeling I got from Wreckage. And when this was coming after two songs that I was already very happy with. And when I heard Wreckage, I was just like, oh my God, like, all right, we're cooking. Like, this is the thing. Like, I had such high hopes for this album. And we talked about how we didn't want to let our hopes and hype get in front of us. But I had such high hopes, and when I heard Wreckage, I just knew that they were going to deliver on it. Like, I didn't even know what the rest of the album was going to sound like, but I was just so confident because of how great this song was. This is just an absolute masterpiece of a Pearl Jam song, and I cannot wait to hear how this sounds live. It's interesting. I don't know how they're going to replicate those harmonies. That can they really achieve that degree of that soaring feeling that you get from it? Are they going to be able to do that live? I don't know. I'm very excited to see how that's going to go, but this song is just amazing.
Yeah, and on top of it, we know we get all the Tom Petty references. We know that at the end of the song, the chord progression, if you took the vocals out, is like da 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 da,
It's learning to
and it,
fly.
yeah, learning to fly and ain't
Yeah.
got wings. Yeah, it's there. It's the same.
Yep.
It's in a different key, but it's the same chord progression. We get it.
Yep.
But it's awesome. It's absolutely a song that hit me square in the heart. I loved it the first time I heard it. I've heard it 2 dozen times since, and I'm still in love with it. I think
I've
it's the song. It's the song on this record. There, we'll talk about the other one that it might be, but I think this is the song on this record.
Yeah, it is for me. I know this is, and I know exactly what song you're talking about, and that's a great song too. But like this is the one. Like when I this is just going to be the song that I identify. And I wanted to mention too, like so that opening when the song starts, that opening guitar part. I've heard a lot of people like trying to compare it to Garden from 10 because it does have that twangy feel to it, but to
Yeah.
me, it's Let Me Sleep. It's Christmas Time from the 10 Club Christmas album. So like immediately when I heard that, that's where my mind went. And so I think that part again, it put me immediately back in the headspace of being a teenager in my bedroom at my parents' house that I grew up in, listening to a new Pearl Jam song. You know, at that time it was Let Me Sleep. It's Christmas Time, and here now it's on a new Pearl Jam song. But the best part is, as the song progresses, that part becomes more and more diminished. And by the time you get to what Craig was mentioning, the learning to fly part, that part you can't even hear anymore. The song has completely transitioned into something else. And it's just great songwriting. Like they just hit these sensibilities with these songs that take you on journeys. And to me, that's where when I heard Andrew Watt mention like elements of Soundgarden and Temple of the Dog in this album, it's not like literal, like, again, maybe Waiting for Stevie has, we'll get there, has some elements of sounding like Soundgarden, but I think that's really what he means. The way Soundgarden would write songs that like started as one thing and turned into something else by the end. That's not a trick that Pearl Jam does often. They have done it, but they do it a lot on this album, and I like it.
What, and in the Stone Gossard interview that I was listening to, when he was talking about Wreckage, he said that this is a song that was essentially written with Ed and Andrew Watt sitting there with two acoustic guitars in front of everybody, and they wrote it, and they put
Yep.
the song together, and that's how this one came together. And then everybody else agreed on the changes and the alterations, and they built this song, but it started with two acoustic guitars, and
Yeah.
Ed and Andrew Watt.
Yep.
So that brings us to the title track, one that we've probably already talked about. I think we already
Yeah,
talked
I
about
don't
Dark
know
Matter.
that I feel like we can pretty much direct people to that as one of our first episodes if you want to hear our thoughts on Dark Matter, but we can summarize a little bit.
Yeah, let me just say this. So one of the things that I read it in Stephen Hyden's review, and he's somebody who wrote he wrote a Pearl Jam book called The Long Road. It's really good. You should check it out. But one of the things that he noticed in his review, and it's something that you and I have talked about as well, is that sometimes when Pearl Jam goes heavy, they're they're trying to sound like somebody else. And I said it about the punk thing too. But Dark Matter is a heavy song where Pearl Jam is not ceding to sounding like anybody else. It's a heavy song or a fast song or a mildly heavy song that actually pays homage to themselves without ripping
Yep.
themselves off. Like this
Yep.
sounds nothing like Animal, nothing like Go, but it is the same band that brought you those heavier songs.
I hear people try to say, well, Dark Matter is the most like Animal. It's like, and I mean, I think what they really mean, because this doesn't sound like Animal. Go put Animal, listen to Dark Matter, and then go put Animal on. They do not sound alike.
No.
But again, this is something I mentioned in my opening thing. It's not about sounding like these old, and I know it's a natural thing that we all do it as music fans. When a band's been around for a while, you try to say, well, what does it sound like? It's not about what it sounds like. It's what does it feel like? And to me, Dark Matter doesn't sound like Animal, but it feels a little bit like Animal. And certainly in the context of this album, whereas, Animal obviously is the second track, and here it's the fourth track, but I feel like it's doing the same kind of heavy lift that it's doing early in the album, giving it that jolt that's going to carry through what's coming after it. and and it was Daughter. It was what was after Animal before, and we're gonna get to Won't Tell. But I think that they wanted that punch of Dark Matter up in front of Won't Tell.
I'm just going to say that I'm surprised that I still like Dark Matter as much as I do, because the first single from Pearl Jam records historically has been one that I
Yeah.
was like interested in and then quickly forgot about or quickly
Yep.
started skipping. I don't see myself skipping this one.
No,
I
definitely not. And I think
so
we talked about, we did the quiz where I quizzed you on all the first Pearl Jam singles, and it's usually not what you would expect. Like, I'm telling you right now, if Pearl Jam really wanted to get everybody being like, "Oh my God, Pearl Jam is back," they would have done Wreckage and Waiting for Stevie as the first two singles.
yeah.
Instead, they went a different direction. So, and I think that's just Pearl Jam being Pearl Jam.
So in my written review that I wrote yesterday, I group the next three songs together, and we will talk about them individually, but Won't Tell, Upper Hand, and Waiting for Stevie, I identified as kind of like the middle meat of a record. That
Mm-hmm.
this is the point in some of Pearl Jam's records where it felt like it started to fall apart. They started strong, and maybe they mixed in a good song here or there, but when I heard 5, 6, and 7, Won't Tell, Upper Hand, and Waiting for Stevie, that's when I realized like this thing was a heck of a lot fuller and bigger a record. Um, However, there was a little bit of chatter in your friend group about Won't Tell. So why don't you tell everybody kind of where the debate went up and down, and then you and I'll talk about it.
Yeah. So Won't Tell is
Well,
um
actually, let me go
I
first. I
yeah,
described it
go ahead.
as a mid-tempo alternative hit that sounds like it could have been written for Yield, even if sonically it sounds much more modern.
And I don't think I really agree with that much at all, actually. And it's rare
Fair
for us
enough.
to disagree on things like that, but uh I just don't get any feelings of Yield from this song. But I like this song more than some of the friends that I was talking to about this song, who actually very strongly disliked it on first listen. They actually liked it more on subsequent listens, I will say. But the thing about Won't Tell is I think the verse is excellent. I the Everything on this song is great except for the chorus. And the chorus is a friend of mine described it as adult contemporary. And that's kind of what, as soon as he said that, I was like, yeah, he's kind of right. Like, it kind of is an adult contemporary. It's
But adult
it's
contemporary, not
probably the
in like
least.
not in the way it's like Michael Bolton, but in the way that Goo Goo
No, but
Dolls and some of the other the late stage alternative
yeah.
90s bands started crossing over to like VH1, and in Cleveland it's 106.5 and 104.1 as opposed to the alternative or the hard rock stations. Um, where and it was a celebration for those bands because they sold a lot more records, and then they ended up in the dollar bin.
Yeah. No, I just think that it is that, but I think this is the song that to me feels the least like Pearl Jam. It To me it feels like a different band a little bit, which there's nothing particularly wrong with that. Like, I'm just like, if this is my least favorite song on the album, like this is this is still so much better than my least favorite songs on any of the past 4 or 5 Pearl Jam albums. Like, I I don't want to sit here and like make it sound like I hate this song, because I don't. I do have some friends who hated it on first listen, but I think this is proven to be one of the more divisive songs on this. But I will tell you, in the theater, like, it got really loud applause when this song ended. So people in the theater liked it a lot. So take that
Well,
for what
and
it's worth.
as a compliment to you, I tend to like poppier and more radio friendly stuff than you do, and
You know,
I still like the radio friendly prom songs and soundtrack songs that the Goo Goo Dolls write. So for me,
yeah.
I loved it. But I would just say that like when Pearl Jam releases Just Breathe, and a song like that kind of defies who Pearl Jam
Hmm.
is, like this is now in the zone. It's now fair game.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I mean, look, Last Kiss was that line of demarcation, right? Like, there, like I remember Pearl Jam fans who very much felt offended by that song. Like, what
Yeah,
is this? Isn't Pearl Jam? What are they doing? So for them to do "Won't Tell," like it shouldn't make us blink. And from that standpoint, you're right. I'm probably a little bit wrong when I say it doesn't sound like Pearl Jam because Pearl Jam has done this a lot in these over the course of this latter half of their career. So maybe I'm a little guilty of like being like, well, this doesn't sound like the Pearl Jam I want them to be, you know. So
yeah.
um, but I do agree with you, your point about though this setting up the middle part of this record. This is when you would have, uh, you know, like so traditionally like a song like, and I hate to say this because I do like "It's All Right" from Gigaton, but like that's the point. Like when you get to "It's All Right" and they're playing a marimba and like it's like it just totally like slams the brakes on where they were going with Quick Escapes. You know, that whole Quick Escape into "It's All Right" is such like a hard stop on that album. And then, you know, different people feel different ways about a song like 7 o'clock, which I actually love that song, but I know a lot of fans don't. But then it leads into that middle section of Gigaton, which is a bit of a grind to get through. I've been listening to Gigaton a lot recently just to kind of remind myself what I liked about it. And I'm finding
Let me get
myself
to
remembering,
retrograde. Let me get to retrograde.
yeah. So this is where, you know, Won't Tell doesn't do that. It's not a hard stop on this album. It definitely carries you through. And it's a perfect lead in for Upper Hand and what
Yeah.
Upper Hand is.
So
So,
Upper Hand begins with kind of another one of those. I don't know if it's an interlude or a lead in, but it just sounds like the Edge is playing with all his delay pedals. I love the sound. I love how it leads in, and then I love how it completely departs from that into the
yep.
opening riffs of the chorus and the pre-chorus and all that kind of stuff. And then later on, my favorite part of Upper Hand is the guitar solo, which is it's
Mm-hmm.
melodic like a Pink Floyd guitar solo. It's it it's not too busy. It serves the song. It hits all. I can't believe I'm going to say this. It hits all the right notes, Andrew.
Yes, it
It hits.
does.
Um, but no, it really does, like literally and figuratively, in ways that we probably haven't heard Mike McCready playing this loose and this creative and this
Yeah.
free in a long time. And not free in like I'm gonna noodle and I'm gonna shred and I'm gonna, but in a way that was just gut
It's
wrenching in the
musical.
best possible
It,
ways.
it's musical. Like so that, and that's when Mike's at his best. You know, um, Mike is an unbelievable lead guitar player. I watched interview with him talking about you know this record, and he talked about how he traditionally really he doesn't write his solos. He just goes into the studio and whatever he feels, he just rips off these solos. Not rips them off like steals them, but like just rips them. Like, I mean, he's an unbelievable guitar player. But sometimes that approach can make it a little bit more proggy. Is that maybe the, you know, and less musical? It's more technical. And on this album, you know, for whatever reason, his solos just feel so much more musical, and nowhere do you feel that more than Upper Hand. Upper Hand starts, like Craig said, as a U2 song and turns into a Pink Floyd song. But like
And
that
I think they name
beginning,
checked the Cure as well.
yeah, I would say like I don't know if you mentioned it or somebody mentioned to me that Won't Tell reminded them of the Cure, and that I hear too. So there's some Cure on this as well, but like you know that beginning of Upper Hand, you're going to hear a lot of people compare it to Where the Streets Have No Name, but that's one of the best intros to a song ever, and I don't feel like this is a ripoff of that, but again, it makes you feel some of those same things. Like I felt that way the first time I heard this. I was like, where is this song going? And then it doesn't go where you think it's going to go. And I think that's my favorite part of this. There's a buildup and then it turns into a different song than what you were expecting it to be. And again, this is a Stone Gossard song, and that's the name of the game for him, is to sort of subvert your expectations of where you think a certain guitar part's going to go.
As an aside, we should talk about this. When Stone was doing his interview and they talked about U2, and he admitted that he hadn't made it to the Sphere to see that show. He also said that he can't imagine Pearl Jam doing a show in the Sphere because it doesn't really play to their ability to. Those shows need to be scripted. If you're going to play to
Yes.
a giant video performance on the inside of a Sphere, you got to be buttoned up. You got to play to the click. You got to play to the track. You got to play to the video. It should be interesting though to see if that changes after Fish does it, because Fish is going to head into the Sphere here soon, and I can't imagine they're going to play a buttoned up show to a click and a video track. So we'll see.
I appreciate though this sentiment from Stone,
I
because,
do too.
and we just talked this week, I think, about, Nine Inch Nails, and I was talking about the Lights in the Sky tour when Trent had the most elaborate stage setup Nine Inch Nails has ever done. I mean, it was this giant wall, this LED wall that they could do all kinds of tricks with. And it was one of the most awe-inspiring shows I've ever been to. I would pay so much money to be able to go to that show again. And I think that's awesome. But all these things have a time and place, because I equally appreciate the fact that in Pearl Jam's entire career, I don't recall them ever even hardly having so much as a backdrop when they play live. Like, the Pearl Jam stage setup is rugs on the floor. You have your amps. Jeff's got his starting lineups on there. You've got a few, like, there's been like bats and like different things to set in the mood, different props that they use. But there's no gimmicks. It's not a showcase extravaganza. It's let's let the music do the talking. It's all about the music when they play live, and that's why they're considered one of the best live bands in the world. So I understood where Stone was coming from. That for him, yeah, like not a lot of interest in playing the Sphere, because that's not a Pearl Jam show. But sometimes it's good to get outside of your comfort zone. So I would say that to Stone. Maybe something to think about. Like, you don't have to always play that way, but maybe worth giving it a shot.
Well, and I would like to see them. I would like to see anybody in the Sphere. I would especially like to see. I would like to see Pearl Jam in the Sphere, and if they could find a way to do it in their loose playing style, I'd be all for it. Um, so anyway, yeah. What else do we need to say about Upper Hand? I feel like I dragged us off the reservation there.
I would point out it is the longest song on the album at
Is it
almost
really?
6 minutes. Yeah, yeah.
See,
It's about 6 minutes.
if you asked me blind, I would have guessed it was Waiting for Stevie.
Yeah, but no, it's Upper Hand, and it does not feel that way. But
No. All right, so that brings us to the other candidate for best song on the record, and a lot of Pearl Jam fans have already identified this one as their favorite by a long shot. Waiting for Stevie. I'm going to let you go first on this one because I'm jealous that
yeah,
you got to hear it in the theater twice, and I
yeah.
don't. I'm jealous you got to hear it with the visualizations.
I should mention, like, I don't, because I haven't talked about this. Like, the cool thing about the whole theater thing was, the first time they played through, when they did it in the dark. So because I was just kind of reclined back, had my eyes closed, I really experienced the Atmos surround sound. Like, it felt like I was reclined in a chair in the middle of a room, and nobody else was in the room except Pearl Jam, who lined up in a circle around me. Like, the drums felt in front, like, so I felt like Matt was there. Ed also felt from the front, but I strongly felt uh, Mike to the left. Jeff was slightly in the back. Stone was on the right. At one point, I actually turned my head because I thought somebody was actually playing a tambourine right behind my ear. That's how precise that surround mix was. And so that was really cool to get to experience. And then and especially for Waiting for Stevie, when that opening riff plays, and it was just like, it's so familiar without being specific. It's not like you're going to hear this and say, oh, this sounds like that song, but like, it is a strong Soundgarden vibe. Like, that riff is a kind of riff that Soundgarden would absolutely play. And oh my God, did they let Matt Cameron cook on this song? I mean, Matt Cameron's great on this whole album. It's the first time this album is the first album I have felt like Matt felt like the drummer in Pearl Jam and not a guy filling in for the drummer in Pearl Jam. I know not everybody agrees with me on that take, but
You're not going to hear any arguments from me. I played drums as a kid. That was one of the things, other than Eddie Vedder, that's one of the things I focused in on. I know that apparently Dave Abraziz is a giant a-hole, but dude was my favorite drummer stylistically by a
yes.
long shot. And I love Matt Cameron. I really do. They're
Mm-hmm.
lucky I stuck around through Jack Irons, who I also like as a person, but as a drummer is muddy and slow and deliberate.
But he also gives us things like In My Tree that, like, if there's
Like I
like
said, they're lucky I stuck through Jack Irons. No,
I
I'm
mean,
being a jerk, but you know.
that's a song that, like, Matt Cameron has talked about. Like, he still struggles to play that
Yeah.
because it's such a weird piece of drumming. Jack definitely, like, brought a different element to Pearl Jam, and I do think he's key to Pearl Jam still being here. But we don't need to dive deep into Jack Irons right now. I'll just say, like, nobody is going to dispute that Matt Cameron is a better drummer than Dave A. Just in general, like, when you're listing who's the best drummers, Matt
Yeah,
Cameron is the better drummer.
so are the two drummers who've played with Primus. But that's not the
Yeah.
like that's not what we're
But
talking about.
right, but like, when it came to who fit Pearl Jam the best, I've always felt like it was Dave. Like, I I just, something about the way he would play, specifically around, like, I always felt like he was, like, playing with space around Mike's leads in a way that the other drummers don't. I mean, Matt has come in and, like, a lot of times, again, because he's essentially playing the role of a fill-in for, especially when he first started, that a lot of the songs he's just kind of keeping the beat, right? Like, he's not.
Well, let me tell you what it is. So Dave used, and because I copied him. I mean, he was, when I started to play drums and I learned to play drums, Dave was the drummer of Pearl Jam. So between him and Jimmy Chamberlain, I was doing everything I could, poorly, mind you, because I'm not that great of a drummer, to play like those guys. But I was copying all those little ghost notes on the hi-hats and the little flourishes and all those little extra notes that if they weren't there, it would be okay, but you could hear them because they accented everything on like a hi-hat or on a ride or an extra crash. Those little things, those were the little flourishes that Dave A brought to the band. And Matt Cameron, who is a better drummer, doesn't play the
Mhm.
same way. He just doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but on this album, they really did create that space for Matt to play the way he wants to play. And I think that's another thing that I love about this album. But I have totally buried the lead here. Like, we cannot talk about Waiting for Stevie without talking about Ed's performance on this song. I mean, Ed is
No.
awesome on this whole album. It's unbelievable when you go back and you listen to how thin Ed's voice sounded on some of the last couple of Pearl Jam albums, and just how alive his voice sounds again. It's
It's the
unbelievable.
writing too. It's the vocal melody
It
writing.
and it's a vocal melody as well. And nowhere is that more evident on this album for me than Waiting for Stevie. Like, this is Eddie Vedder. Like, if you want to say anything is vintage on this album, like, this is vintage Eddie Vedder on Waiting for Stevie. I mean, I cannot get over that vocal performance that he delivers on this. And then, so you go through the song, you get to the middle part. It's got a nice little bridge section. You hit the Yeah, you
Yeah,
hit the you want to talk about this part?
yeah. So the song drops out, except for just the guitar riff and the bass line at about 2 minutes
Yep.
and 30 seconds, and then Matt Cameron
Unbelievable.
machine guns Pearl Jam back into this song for one of the most triumphant, anthemic, stadium filling finishes the band has done in their entire career. Sorry,
Yep.
am I overstating it?
No, no, you're not, because that's the thing.
Thank
And
you.
when, the way Andrew Watt described it was, he said the way he views Pearl Jam is, when, if they're doing it right, you have Matt Cameron delivering these fills that suddenly the rest of the band is just white knuckling it, hanging on for dear life as they get brought back to the beat. And that's exactly what they nailed on that section.
Can
And
you
then it
imagine a
just
drummer who makes
drops.
Jeff Ament white knuckle anything? I love it. I
Exactly.
love
It's
it.
it's unbelievable. And then it just drops into, it's like it just sort of does this weird little shift, and then it's like Mike McCready just steps forward, and Mike just unloads on the outro to this song. I mean, the whole band just nails that outro, but like, this is where the Temple of the Dog comparisons have come in. Like, this is the reach down solo of this album. This is Alive Part Two. Like, this is ending the song with 2 minutes of no singing, just the band just jamming, and Mike McCready bringing us home. And
So in my written review, I said that in live, when if and when, let's just say when they play Stevie and it goes for
no,
8 or 9 minutes,
yeah,
nobody's going to be upset.
you're not gonna
It's
feel
going
it.
to be
No,
awesome.
because that's exactly what they did with Alive. Like, Alive is twice as long live as it is on the album. And I mean, it's a long song on the album, but like, they can stretch that thing out as
Yep.
long as they want to. I truly view this as Alive Part Two. Like, that's what this song is.
And so, what's the backstory on this one? Like Andrew Watt and Eddie Vedder were together, and they were literally
So
waiting for Stevie Wonder.
yeah, so this is friends don't let friends use working titles for album titles. This is a working title, clearly.
Thank you.
Uh, this is so yes, the story is they were working on Earthling, and they, at one point, like, they had gotten Stuart Copeland to play
So hang
drums,
on. So
Chad Smith.
Earthling was Eddie Vedder's solo record
Eddie,
that he made with Andrew
yeah,
Watt.
yep, that was kind of the first time working with Andrew,
I'm
and
just
they
going to
were
assume at least a
originally.
couple of people don't know what we're talking about.
You're probably right. I do that a lot. Um, and uh, so, like, originally, I forget what he said they were going to call it, but like, basically it was going to be a gimmick of them getting all the best drummers in the world. Like, so they had gotten like Stuart Copeland, Chad Smith, Matt Cameron, a couple other drummers who I don't even remember right now. And then they're like, well, we got to get Stevie Wonder. And so that was like the gimmick. So they were trying to get Stevie Wonder to play on the album. Now, I think he ended up playing harp on the album. Um, but anyways, they were waiting for Stevie, and they just were messing around, and they started writing something, and they were just like, man, like, this would be an awesome Pearl Jam song. And so they just demoed it, called it Waiting for Stevie, because that's what they were doing. That's what you do with working titles. Working titles tend to be very descriptive of the time and place of it. And they never changed it. And I suspect that they didn't change it for the sole reason of they wanted to tell that story. I'm just convinced. They're like, everybody's going to ask us about Waiting for Stevie, and like, I want to tell them, like, you could have still told the story. Like, people are fine with you offering up a story. It doesn't need a natural lead in. If you wanted to tell a story about writing a song while waiting for Stevie Wonder to play on your solo album, guess what? People are going to care about that story. So, um, but anyways, I digress. It's just that I very much don't like the title "Waiting for Stevie."
And do
Uh,
yourself a favor. Go to YouTube and search for Stevie Wonder playing the drums.
yeah,
Your mind is going to be blown if you've never seen it. And even if you have
yeah.
seen it.
Do it again.
All right. Should we go to Running?
Yeah. And again, they did a little outro thing, an interlude outro to Stevie. to set up
When I was
running. And
listening to
this,
a not quite so legal copy of the record, I was very confused whether this was a track or not.
yep. I've heard people say that they felt that way in the theater too. They're like, wait, did they just screw up and skip something or what? But what they really did was they gave space between Stevie and Running, because I don't think those songs would work. They wouldn't flow back to back. You know how I know this? Because the second time they played the album at the theater thing, the visualization time, for whatever reason, that interlude was not there. It
They
went
didn't have a
straight from Stevie.
visualization for it. That
They
was the
didn't have,
single
right.
version.
And so it went straight from Stevie
I guess we know what the
into,
next single is going to be.
that's right. That's right. Because it already exists. But
They
it went
created
straight
the
from
YouTube
Stevie
video.
into Running. And I I was like, oh, I was like, boy, that doesn't flow as well, because the first time it went through, like I never knew how Running was going to fit on this album exactly. And just doing that little interlude gives you just enough space that it totally works. And I loved Running even more. Like I already liked Running, but I loved it in the flow and context of this album. It is in the perfect spot on this album.
So for me, running would be a miserable song if it didn't cut time in the middle. That makes the entire song,
I
and
love that part.
it's 2 minutes and 19 seconds, a quick hitter. But yeah, I don't even want to imagine what that song would be like without the cut time section. But it's great. It's great. I like it.
Yeah.
Which brings us to maybe the most controversial song, easy for me to say, on the
Yeah.
record, Something Special. Which, by the way, that's also the only writing credit that Josh Klinghoffer, touring guitarist, former
Hmm.
Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist, has on the record as well. I'll let you go first to describe Something Special, and then talk about how
Yeah.
you feel about it.
Sure. So I have a sneaky suspicion, I don't have any confirmation of this, that this might have been a leftover from the Earthling sessions. I feel like this was perhaps written, at least the ideation of this came from those sessions. Because to me, if anything on this album sounds more like an Ed Solo song than a Pearl Jam song, it's probably this one. Um, but here's what's funny about this song. So when CBS had March Madness, they got the rights to play some Pearl Jam songs going into commercial breaks. And Something Special was one of those ones. And all of a sudden, this clip was all over Twitter. And it was a bunch of Pearl Jam fans basically saying, what the hell is this? Like, this is not, like, people freaked out. And it was literally a 8-second clip, 8 seconds of the song. And all I heard from it was the Clash, "Lovers Rock." Like that's what I heard from London Calling. Like that's where my mind went, and that made me excited because I'm like, oh, like they're actually trying something here with this. So I don't think this song works as well as Lovers Rock does, but like I when I heard Something Special, and I had already heard so many fans talk about, oh, it's cringe, it's embarrassing, it's the corniest thing. This is the let the record play of this album. I was really expecting something on that level, and it is
Can you
not that
explain Let the
at
Records Play?
all. Let the Records Play is the worst song Pearl Jam has ever made, in my opinion. It's on Lightning Bolt. It is this like the, and I feel bad because it's a Stone song, and
They've
I
never
mean
once played it live.
you guys know by now how much I love Stone Gossard, but like it is the corniest little blues riff thing. Like it just doesn't work. It's an absolute mess. Um, if you ever hear, like, there is a clip on YouTube of Stone just playing the part by himself, and when you hear that, you're like, oh, there was an idea to a song there. I get why he thought that this was a song. It's just that they didn't put the effort in to actually make it a song. They instead just all played along to what that original idea, and just it's such a lazy feeling song. So but I would say Something Special to me is not anywhere near that. Like Something Special is a good song. It's a sweet song. It's a song, like, yes, the lyrics are on the nose, little cheesy. It's parents telling their daughters how much they love them. Um, you know it, but
It's a
like
good song
the song is not bad.
in the
There's
way
you
that you
don't
can
have to skip this song.
it's a good
Yeah.
song in the way that you can identify a good song when you hear it come out of Nashville by professional songwriters, and
Hmm.
you almost don't care who performs it. It could be performed by three different starlets in Nashville or two dudes with scraggly beards, and
Yeah.
it would be that kind of a song. It probably doesn't belong in this record. It's probably not really. It probably doesn't belong on a Pearl Jam record, but the quality of the songwriting, the quality of the song, just like I can listen to the Beyonce record,
Hmm.
which I don't like, and identify the good songs on that. I can identify the fact that this is a quality, well written song, even if I kind of don't think it probably
I'll
belongs in this record.
I'll tell you this much too. Again, when the type of fans who are going to a movie theater to listen to an album 3 days early are already predisposed to like Pearl Jam, obviously. So take this with a grain of salt, but like you could kind of gauge which songs the fans were more enthusiastic about because they were cheering after every song, and certain songs would be more energetic or enthusiastic than some of the other ones. But after Upper Hand, a girl who was sitting behind me said, "That's my favorite song so far." And I thought to myself, like, okay, like I liked Wreckage more, but I get it. Like Upper Hand was a cool song. After Something Special was over, she said, "Never mind, that's my favorite song." And another fan was like, "Yeah, mine too." Um, it, the fans actually received that really well in the theater. Um, it sounded good in
Were
that
you in
theater. Like,
Columbus? Because Columbus might as well be the deep south as far as country music goes.
yeah, there you go. So yeah, I was in
A little
Columbus for it.
Columbus, Ohio slander for you.
Yeah, I was in Columbus for it, but yeah, no. So like, I just think that it's fine for what it is. It's gonna always be one of my least favorite songs on the album, but like, it's fine. I will not skip this song when I listen to Dark Matter. Like, I have no inclination to skip this song. I can listen to this song. It's fine.
Well, and spoiler alert, I don't think there are any skippable songs on there's none that I
No,
need to
no,
skip on this record. Which
no.
brings us to Got to Give, which honestly, like, I'm not going to skip it, but we should go quickly because we've got some place to get to. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way
So
I feel about Got to Give.
this is another one we probably disagree a little bit on. I actually think that this is an overlooked song. I think it's underrated by just listening to the way people talk about it. I think it's a much better song than the way, like, when I see people's ratings. Like, I view this as sort of the In Hiding of this album. So again, if we're making the comparisons to Yield, yes, I know Push Me Pull Me comes in between, but In Hiding serves as the lead up to the end of the album, and all those yesterdays. I think Got to Give is the perfect setup song for Setting Sun. And I just think it works so well on that, which again, maybe that's an indictment on the song to say that it doesn't stand on its own merits, but
I think it's a
I
very good song.
yeah, it's
I
just that there's so many good songs on this album. Like, you get to the point, you're just like, well, I don't know. It's not going to compare to Wreckage. It's not going to compare to Upper Hand, Waiting for Stevie. Scared for me, Scared of Fear, I think is much better. Like, it's not going to compare to those songs. So you can only talk about everything so much, I guess.
how much would you love this? You're going to hate me for this, but how much would you love this record if React Respond and Something Special were B-sides?
So I just could not. I would not take React Respond off of this. I wouldn't mind if Something Special was not on the album. I'm not heartbroken, but I
Yeah.
stand with React Respond. So
So again, I like it. I think it sticks out though. I think it sticks out a bit like a sore thumb.
yeah, okay.
So, and again, I think we kind of gave short shrift to Got to Give, but it's a good song. It is.
That's why it's overlooked, and we'll just let it be overlooked,
Yeah.
even by us.
Because the band ends the record with Setting Sun. One of the tropes that you and I talk about is great albums have great endings. I wasn't convinced right away, as this one started that it was going to be a great song, but as it builds, this one builds and it goes and it keeps going, and all of a sudden I'm like halfway through it and I'm like, I think this might be one of the best ending songs Pearl Jam's done in their career.
I said to you that when I got home from the theater, I said, Setting Stun can be in the conversation as the best Pearl Jam closing album closer of all time. I
Second
said
best
it's
release,
not.
but that's fine.
I I said it's not. I said it's not. But I
Yeah.
said it can make an argument. It deserves a seat at the table to have its argument heard. And that's an incredible thing to talk about. Now, uh, to be fair, they have done so many clunkers for album closers in recent years. Like the end, it's a it's a pretty song, but like it's not a good inspiring album closer. River Cross, like again, I like the spirit of the song and what it stands for, what it means, but like as an album closer, it's a little bit of a clunker and it doesn't inspire me to run it back again, you know. And with with Setting Sun, like I was with you when it first started. It had a little bit of that the end vibe to it, like
It was a little too
uh,
busy, a little bit
yeah.
whatever.
And the vocal melody felt very late era Pearl Jam album closer at first, and so I was with you. I was like, oh, this, and like you said, it just builds and keeps building and keeps building. And I love the crescendo at the end, and then it just goes out with just the simple acoustic guitar, that nice, crisp, singular acoustic guitar. And it just leaves you perfectly wanting to hit play again. And I can't tell you how many times already I've listened to this whole album, get to the end, like, all right, we're listening to this again, because it's the hallmark of a great closing song, and that's Setting Sun absolutely nails that aspect. It's just the perfect album closer for this, and it's again like you just talk about the emotions of it. Like when we got to that point on my first listen, and it was just like it was almost hard to even take it all in. It was just like I don't know what I just experienced. Like what was that? Like not talking about that song, that album. Like what on earth did I just listen to? Like not in a bad way, in a like how on earth did we get this kind of a Pearl Jam album delivered? Uh, and Setting Sun just could not be a more perfect cherry on top to that album.
All right, before we get to our Jerry Springer final thoughts, um, let me ask this question, and I think I know the answer, and it's not a big deal. But I'm not a professional music reviewer. I'm not a professional music critic, but I've been doing this a long time. I've been writing about music on the internet for over 20 years now, and there are some reviews where I was super, super duper excited and in love with something, only to come back later and go, hey, I think I was prisoner of the moment. I think I was lost in the woods, and I can no longer feel the way I felt about that record. It was jarring and surprising and entertaining and interesting in the moment, but it didn't have legs. Most notably, I bring up one of our favorite bands, Deaf Heaven. I don't know that I stand by my review of Infinite Granite, which was their departure from black metal screaming into like singing and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel the way I feel about that record the way I did the day I wrote that thing. And I won't say I'm embarrassed by it, but I think about it.
Sure.
What percentage chance do you think there is that you will look back on the way that we're talking about this record today, and you might go, yeah, maybe I was a little bit over the top about X?
I give it like a 30% chance. Um, and only I don't think I've ever been this over the top excited about a new Pearl Jam album recently, but like I remember when Gigaton came out, and I felt pretty confident in saying like that was my favorite album since Binaural, and I don't think I feel that way today. I think I would still put Avocado above Gigaton. I remember when Lightning Bolt came out and hearing like a song like My Father's Son and like Yellow Moon and Infallible, like it felt like they were doing something different and sort of unique. And I was very excited by that. And I said, this is Pearl Jam coming out of their shell. I can't tell you the last time I listened to Lightning Bolt. Like it's not one I go back to very frequently. So there's some red flags there. But I will say, I can only say that I know that the feeling I got from this is different from those, because those was when I would talk about those, it was me talking from my head. Like all my feelings on this album are coming from my heart. Like this makes me feel emotions about Pearl Jam that I haven't felt in a long time. And this is not a departure album for them like Infinite Granite. This isn't them trying something new. This was them, again, rediscovering their creative spark, like understanding what they do at their best and saying there's nothing wrong with us just giving into that and doing what we do best. Let's be a confident rock band, an established rock band. Let's just make the best rock album that we can as Pearl Jam. And I think that's what they did.
All right. I'm going to finish with my final thoughts, but I want to give you a chance to.
What was it? What was your percentage?
Oh, I'm with you. I agree 100. I agree. I was going to say 100%. I agree completely. I think my percentage is even lower than 30. But your point about it not being a departure, but leaning into them being their authentic selves, even if it's the 2024 version of their authentic selves.
Yeah.
The reason why this hits us in the soul is that it sounds like a Pearl Jam record. And for my money, it begins and it ends with Eddie Vedder and his vocals and his vocal melodies. Yes, all the other stuff is great. And I hate to just like wash it away. But for me, if those vocal melodies aren't there, it's not my favorite Pearl Jam. This is why I love Sirens. This is why I love Amongst the Waves. I love the big anthemic stadium filling songs. And this one has vocal melodies that will I don't know that there's a lot of sing-alongs here, but this one has a lot of stadium filling anthemic vocal lines.
It's not the sing-alongs, but the fist pumps are there. Like that's what this album has. I think we've probably done Ed a bit of a disservice tonight. We probably really haven't talked enough about how good Ed sounds on this album, and you're right. That's hugely important to
And
Pearl Jam
probably
sounding like
Andrew
Pearl
Watt
Jam.
hasn't made more of an impact on any part of Pearl Jam more from the solo record Earthling. That's something you and I noticed. Nobody knows because we didn't have a podcast then. But we were talking about his vocal work on Earthling and so I think that was the nature of why we were so excited when we found out that Andrew Watt was working on the Pearl Jam record, because we were going to get the best version of Eddie Vedder. And you can't
Yeah.
have the best version of Pearl Jam without the best version of Eddie Vedder. He's the starting quarterback. He's the starting pitcher. Make the comparison you want. Without the lead singer, none of the rest of it works. We learned that in Almost Famous. I'm only the lead singer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's all spot on, and I do think it's just my sort of final thoughts on this is this feels like a culmination of something I've felt building inside that I've wanted to believe for so long, but was scared to allow myself to really believe that this could be happening. But it started with a couple things. One was listening to the Gigaton tour bootlegs, the official bootlegs, and hearing Josh playing with Pearl Jam, Josh Klinghoffer playing with Pearl Jam. I loved the energy he gave their live show. The Gigaton live tour was the best Pearl Jam had sounded live in forever. So that was like the first thing I noticed. I was like, there's okay, you sort of bank that. There's something interesting going on there. And then the second thing is what you just touched on, Earthling. When I heard that solo album, and even like the first single off of it, which the title of that song escapes me now, but it was that super Tom Petty sounding song. you know, like as I listened to that solo album, like the songwriting was fine. Like it was clear, like compared to ukulele songs in the Into the Wild soundtrack where Ed was doing the, you know, which Stone mentioned in the one interview when Stone said like, when left to our own devices, we tend to start writing very myopically, and that like that's very true of Stone, but it's also very true of Ed, especially like when left to his own devices. His songwriting is very myopic. And when I heard Earthling, like the songwriting had opened up. Now, are those my favorite songs in the world? No, they're not. But like there's a couple like really good songs in there. Like Brother the Cloud is really freaking good. But the thing I noticed was the vocals. How they sounded, but as you mentioned earlier tonight, the vocal melodies he was writing on that solo album sounded like the vocal melodies he used to write in Pearl Jam. Whereas
Yeah.
he, in recent years, he'd done that fast staccato, trying to fit as many syllables in. He also has been overwriting a lot lately, like trying to use huge words all the time. Like, you know,
So back in
just,
the old days of Opie and Anthony, they used to call it shoehorning lyrics in. And Eddie Vedder was
yes,
shoehorning.
absolutely. And so when I found out that Andrew Watt was doing this album, when I found out that Klinghoffer was an unofficial member of the band, that he was still working with them on stuff, I allowed myself for the first time in a while to kind of get intrigued. Maybe not excited, intrigued. And then like this all started listening to A Metal Door, you know, when that at that first preview event of Dark Matter, and just hearing those clips of the song bleeding through that metal door and being like, these kind of sound good. Like really good. Like this sounds like what I wanted Pearl Jam to get back to being. Um, and so it was all this building of this hope, like trying to be cautiously optimistic, but trying to not let the hype get out of control. And they landed it. Like they nailed this album. I have, I really have zero complaints about this album. It's not my favorite Pearl Jam album of all time, but like I am so happy to have an album that I feel is not just a reason to go tour. Like these are songs I'm going to be listening to the rest of my life. Like Wreckage, I will never stop listening to Wreckage. Waiting for Stevie, Setting Sun, you know, Scared of Fear. Like I'm going to be listening to these songs for the rest of my life, and that's awesome.
All right, now it's time for my Jerry Springer final thoughts.
Yep.
With Dark Matter, what you're left with is the most cogent, cohesive, beautiful, urgent, and vital Pearl Jam album in at least a decade, and probably since Yield. I'm in the tank for Pearl Jam as a longtime fan, but in some ways that makes me the most qualified to say that this thing is that good. And now, with that, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.
There we go. Well said. Well said.
It's the Album of Record podcast. I hope, honestly, truthfully, look, I'm not telling you you need to love it because we love it. I just hope you do, because we deserve it. You deserve to love it as a Pearl Jam fan. So I hope you do.
There we go.
All
I
right,
think
we'll
we
talk
did
to you
it.
next time.
We've been looking forward to doing this episode since we started this podcast. We said, hey, at some point, Pearl Jam is going to put out this new album, and we're going to have an episode to talk about it. And I'm so happy it's here. When this comes out, the album is going to be out. Enjoy it. Enjoy listening to this, my friends.
We'll talk to you next time. It's the Album of Record podcast.